Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about the newest album from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard called Fishing for Fishies. So I'll be honest, I'm always a little bit tentative to tell any sort of artist that what they're looking to pursue is a bad idea. Because you never know, right? I've been surprised time and time again by acts who are willing to make wild pivots and stick the landing with their experimentation. And who the hell am I to say one way or the other? And I say this because, well, when I heard the buzz that King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard were going to be making a shuffling blues rock project with an emphasis on boogie, well, I had concerns. Not that it was inherently bad or something that the band couldn't pull off. They've jumped across plenty of genres with aplomb, and going back to the roots of the groovy garage rock tones where they have pulled a lot of inspiration, that's got some promise, especially if they took a year off between this and the 5 albums they put out in 2017, where the quality was actually pretty high. Now, granted, the critical reception for this has always been a little bit more mixed than normal, but again, no guarantee of what could connect. And while several critics were highlighting the increased environmental themes as a point of contention, that's been in the lyrics going back a few albums anyway, especially on Gumboot Soup. So I was ready for that. So, alright, fine. Let's not waste any more time. What do we get on Fishing for Fishies? Well, I know that I'm asking for trouble whenever I make a more mixed King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard review, and this might be one of my more contentious to date. Because not only was my suspicion that this venture was going to be a bad idea proved correct, it was done so in a way that's kind of agonizing to highlight because you could see where it could have worked and yet it doesn't. And while I'm not about to call Fishing for Fishies the worst album that this band has ever made, it is absolutely their most misguided, and one that I can bet will test their cult fan base to the absolute limit. In other words, spoilers, it's not very good. Or I'm not even sure it's good at all. Now, granted, I'll admit to a very certain bias I do have before entering this review, and it does require a bit of historical context that I guarantee most classic rock fans either don't know, have forgotten, or just will refuse to acknowledge. That most of the garage-driven boogie rock of that was released in the golden era of classic rock between the late 60s and early 70s, I like to say between 1968 and 1974, a lot of it just flat out sucks. Now, part of this was driven off of the residual turbulence coming out of the late 60s that few people knew how to properly contextualize. Some of it was driven by proximity to legitimately great classic rock acts who drew upon similar textures, so they got caught up in the shuffle, and at least some of it wound up as part of the classic rock canon by a succession of predominantly white critics who were looking to displace and ignore the successes of the boundary-pushing soul and funk of that era. But you know what? Between the growth of the progressive rock and proto-punk scenes, the explosion of glam rock and arena rock, and the richer cross-section of southern rock and country music, there was an ocean of acts trying to find the sweet spot between it all to make some scuzzed out, swampy grooves between CCR, Deep Purple, and the Allman Brothers, and rewrite Spirit in the Sky for the 100th possible time. And a lot of it, going back to it now, it's really bad, especially lyrically, and yet being classic rock kids at heart, I can absolutely see why King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard wanted to elevate the genre, target it, even celebrate it in that territory. And who knows, they could pull it off. And thus it's kind of alarming how quickly they struck out. And immediately you can point to 2 main factors: the drum production and the vocals. Now, the first might seem surprising, but given how much this sound is driven off the fat bass lines, the scuzzy guitars, and the jaunty piano lines, and then blasts of sizzling organ and harmonica, you want to make sure your drums are as razor-tight support and foundation as possible. What you don't want is a gated pickup where the drums sound compressed and hemmed in, which only paradoxically draws more attention to their choppy stiffness, especially given how loud they can occasionally be in the mix. But what gets a lot worse are the vocals. And let me give some kind of brief credit to the acts in the era that made this sound kind of work. They had huge, raw, howling delivery that had soul and power to command the mix and give it an emotive core of swagger and machismo. So when King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard provides an increasingly rigid and drowned out vocal pickup with harmonies that are either louder than the main vocal line or just non-existent, where there is nothing close to genuine firepower or punch, it gives you the impression they're either completely misunderstanding the appeal of the best acts in the subgenre, or they're taking the piss out of it. And that's not counting a song like Psy Boogie that will then drown itself in vocoders, how mid-70s of them. Now, the overlooked problem that comes out of all of this is that with more developed bass grooves, many of the lead guitar lines default to hammering on the same couple of abortive chords, while the harmonica or the synths or the arranged elements will take more of the melodic lead and presence in the mix. And considering that King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard has always had a knack for their prog side, you can definitely feel them struggling to find ways to develop and twist these tracks, or at least in a way where they're as catchy as their best. And the results don't feel nearly as effective and bluesy as they do overcooked, overthought, watery, overlong, and not particularly flattering or fun. And all this before the final two songs of the album, which dissolve into some synth-heavy progressive pop rock that somehow has even less momentum or groove, which makes some of the ideas here just feel half-baked. I'm not sure how we arrived at that point coming off the rest of the album, but I'm not sure it's all that good. But here's where things actually get even uglier. Because remember that theme of environmentalism that critics took initial issue with and that I said has been really sliding between the margins of previous King Gizzard projects? Well, when we get to the writing, I can see how it can become an issue for two big reasons, and the first is the framing. The opening title track is an anti-fishing song, but it's all framed as being sad and wistful that the fishies are being taken away from their natural habitat. And yeah, that's the extent of the commentary and wordplay we're getting here. And it happens again with the limp observations of what various animals see of human inventions on The Bird Song. And then somehow actively gets worse by embracing the same sort of "you're real isn't real" psychedelic gunk on the song of the same name that I really hated when Lil Dicky brought it onto Earth for many of the same reasons and tying into the stakes. Not made better by the over-arranged and weirdly joyless muck of this thing, which seems to be uncomfortably succumbing to more nihilism, which is the last thing you really want when you have environmental themes. But what's worse is that there's no real vigor in their defense of anything. The watery vocal layering is so lifeless and devoid of firepower that some of the songs defending the environment almost feel kind of pitiful, and the songs emphasizing the more wild, chaotic boogieing, or even the more dangerous side of the natural world like Arcanine, it feel more energetic and dynamic. And that's where you get the weirdly depressed robot who causes nothing of anything because they're all gonna die out on Psy Boogie anyway. And you know what? Some of that might make sense if King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard were trying to take the piss out of these sort of activist causes and environmentalism, but I'm not sure what this really is or if it really ties into that. Because then you get songs with the more riotous plastic boogie that's criticizing your overuse of plastic that winds up being probably the most upbeat and best song here. And then even then, any subtext or deeper insight's flimsy as all hell. I mean, I try to shoot them a little bit of bail with the Cruel Millennial, which is trying to take the piss out of someone who plays the whole born in the wrong generation crowd, but really, an album like this wouldn't exist without some of that form of sonic worship and at least some of that attitude. So I'm not really sure I'm buying the self-awareness here either. But overall, it's more like it feels reminiscent of the weirdly curdled fatalism about environmental catastrophe that really showed up on previous albums. But the arc to get here is so joyless and inert to be all that thrilling, which is again about the last thing you want to say when you say boogie more often than the Silver Convention, because again, the writing on this project is not that good. But overall, it's a bizarre feeling that after putting out 5 albums in a year, most of which are pretty damn solid, King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard took an entire year off and they put out this, a curdled retro genre experiment that feels half-baked, tentative, and utterly unconvincing. Yeah, the songs will always be just catchy enough to be recognizable, and I do respect them trying a little more slightly diverse ideas. To make this sort of idea work nearly 50 years past its sell-by date, that is a daunting task for any act, but no, this didn't work for me at all. It's netting a very light 5 out of 10, and I can only really recommend it for the die-hard fans. I mean, if you're gonna bring back swampy boogie rock, the least thing you could do is keep it loose and kind of fun. Not make this. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know that whenever I'm critical of King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard, you're all gonna have plenty to say about it, so yeah, the poll's over there for y'all tell me how wrong I am, and if you want to buy or stream the album, links down in the description below. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And keep in mind, when Billboard Breakdown drops, it's going to be on the new channel. I keep emphasizing it, but the link is in the card right over here. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.